Good evening, I'm Kristen Schaffer. I'm the Executive Director of Women in Film. It's great to see so many of you here. I see a lot of our members and also the SAG-AFTRA members, so thank you for supporting this. I have a fantastic panel for you tonight and lots of good questions, so please join me in welcoming all of them, and then I'll introduce them to you. There's a lot of love in this room. To my left is director Niki Caro. Next to her, Jessica Chastain. Producer Kim Zubick. Producer Diane Levin. And executive producer Robbie Tollin. It is such a stellar achievement. It's just a really beautiful, meaningful, moving film, and I want to thank all of you for what you put into this over many, many years. And then I wanted to start with a question for Niki. I want to talk about the animals. So. Early in the film, when the animals escape from the zoo, it's so incredibly cinematic and also symbolic. There's these stunning creatures, right? An ostrich and a zebra and a tiger running around this war-torn city. And I'm wondering if that was in the original nonfiction book or if that's a thing that you and the screenwriter worked on together.
Diane will correct me if I'm wrong, but the Warsaw Zoo was hit. Warsaw was where the Second World War really began, and bombs fell around and inside the zoo, and it's true that the animals kind of ran away into the city. And of course, when we were in pre-production, no, earlier than that, when I was obliged to have lots of conversations about how I was going to do things, one of the big things people would always ask me was, well, how are you going to do that sequence? You know, how are you going to get the animals to run around in the road? And I would just say to them, well, I'm going to put them in the road. I'm going to put the lions in the road. And that's what we did. I mean, really, it was only about securing the perimeter and making sure that all the cameras the cameras that were inside with the creatures, they couldn't be operated, of course. So it was a really simple exercise, actually.
I'm glad to hear that. Jessica, the scene with you and the baby elephant and the mama elephant is so beautiful. And there's that moment where the elephant is kind of wrapping its trunk around your neck, and the character that you're playing is so fearless, Antonina, and so just, you know, like an animal whisperer. It's such a beautiful, remarkable scene, and you get to see so much of her character in that moment. How did you prepare for that? What was going on in your head as you were getting ready to do that scene?
I was very fortunate because we had time before we started shooting that I could hang out with the animals. And I had spent some time working with people who dedicate their lives to animals to ask them advice on, you know, what I can do to make them feel safe. And most people said that you just never invade their space or try to possess them or own them or get them to do anything that is unnatural to them. And so I had bonded with that elephant. Her name's Lily. And I knew that her big treat were apples, that she loved apples. And when we shot that scene, you know, we had a puppet for the baby. In the first take, she wasn't really interested in what was happening, and she was like looking in other directions. And I thought, oh, how are we going to get this to work? And I asked if I could give her apples, and they let me. So I gave her a couple apples, and then I just started hiding them all around the set. And I knew of that second take as soon as it started, and I was like, oh yeah, she really wants these apples, because I was covered in elephant mucus, and her trunk was just everywhere searching. And it was like a game we were playing. But that's the beautiful thing about making this movie. And the magic of cinema is you don't have to torture something to make it feel like it's in distress. You know, Lily was actually having a beautiful time. And, you know, with Niki's brilliance in this movie is she's able to, with sound design and the scene, make it look like it's something else.
I understand that you spent some time in the actual Warsaw Zoo. Were there any elements in the zoo that felt like they were remnants of that original zoo, or does it feel like just a different place?
Well, it's all still standing. So the villas in Warsaw, the basements there, the tunnels, the piano that Antonina played is still there. The bug collection is there. It's remarkable to visit. So I would recommend that, you know, anyone has a chance to go to Warsaw to go to the zoo.
So Niki, Jessica talked a little bit about working with you. What was it like for you to work with her?
Oh, well, she is, you are, profoundly skilled. She comes to the set immaculately prepared. She's fiercely intelligent, with just a strong, loving heart and incredible generosity to her scene partners, whether they be human or animal. And I promise you, this movie could not have been made with any other actor, and I could not have worked the way I needed to work to make this movie what it is without you. So thank you.
I want to switch now to talk a little bit about how this movie came to be. And I know, Diane, that you read the book about a decade ago and were so moved that you stayed up all night to finish it. What was it in that story that made you want to bring it to the big screen?
It was, I must say that Robbie, myself, and Kim originally found the source material, and I think all of us thought it was such a stunning portrayal, a stunning portrayal of bravery that we had ever seen. And that being brave in the way Antonina showed it was something that was original. It was an intimate portrayal of war, and we wanted to show how a woman is brave. And one of the things that Jessica showed so beautifully, and Niki created a set that allowed this to happen, was to show that you could be both strong and feminine at the same time. And that healing and nurturing are very, very powerful things. And especially in time of war, that humanity exists, and that we all have to remember that the human race has treasures of kindness that we don't know about. So that is really one of the things that why we wanted to show the story. And we really felt a huge responsibility to Antonina immediately. She was such a huge presence and spirit. And we had the great pleasure, all of us, of meeting her daughter, Teresa, at the zoo at different times in Warsaw. And seeing Teresa really gave us a sense of what Antonina was like. And there was one small story where she only speaks Polish, she doesn't speak English. And we took a tour of the zoo with her, Robbie and myself, and she goes over to the rhino enclosure, which was a natural habitat, very low fences with a moat. And she starts talking to the rhino, and eventually the rhino came up and put his horn and leaned it against her cheek. And she turned to us, and she said it in Polish, but the translator said, "Teresa wants to tell you, you know how my mother dealt with the Nazis? She knew how to talk to predatory animals. And it was really an astonishing moment where we really felt her presence.
Robbie, this is a little bit of a departure from the other work that you do. For those of you who don't know, Robbie produces with Marta Kaufman and does a lot of comedy. What was it that drew you to this material?
Growing up Jewish sort of set me on a path, and I was so drawn to the story, as was Diane. And I felt like there are so many Holocaust stories that I've seen and read about, and I'd never ever heard of anything like this that was both, as Diane said, feminine and real, that involved animals. But it was such a quiet, beautiful story, and it was a choice that this woman made at putting her family at tremendous risk. And I asked myself, would I do that? Would I put my child at risk, my life, my family? And I sure would like to say yes, but I thought it was an incredible act of bravery, and it just drew me in so many different ways, mostly from her character and her story. And then going to Warsaw and going to Auschwitz and really doing all the research that we did just made it so compelling that we were just not going to take no for an answer.
Kim, this is such a female-driven project with women in a lot of lead roles that we don't always see women in. And was that intentional?
Well, I don't think we set out to hire women specifically. We set out to hire the best people for the job. And it just so happened that it was a combination of the type of energy that we were probably exuding, but also the type of material that we were pulling together. And it attracted a certain sensibility and a certain commitment, and I must say that we ended up hiring an extraordinary crew to make this film. And you know, and they're mostly going to be women that come to mind, but Susie Davies, for example, was one of the first people that Niki and I met with, and it was clear within 5 minutes of sitting with her that we were with a goddess. I mean, she just is extraordinary, and very quietly so. But I mean, even our stunt coordinator was a woman from Eastern Germany, and kicked ass. I mean, you know, so yeah, it was really tremendous. Because also with Niki at the helm, it was a very productive, calm. All the drama was taking place on the right side of the camera, and so everybody brought their A game and did their best work and worked tirelessly to make this happen.
You've produced a number of features. Did it feel different, like more collaborative, or?
It felt very different. It felt incredibly different for a couple of reasons. One, the female sensibility on set, but also we were doing this in a magical place. We were doing it in the right place. We were in the Czech Republic, and we had a lot of freedom to really tell the story in the most authentic way. And, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, we also didn't have a lot of oversight coming from big entities. Mm-hmm. I think this is also giving out. Back. Anyway, yes, it felt very different. I think, you know, my background is mostly in studio comedies, ironically. And I hope to continue to make this kind of film.
We hope that you do as well. I wanted to ask you another question, Jessica. I was struck by Antonina's sexuality in the movie, that she has this sort of cat-like way that she's sort of seducing Lutz, thank you. And then she moves into this very authentic, intimate, passionate relationship with her husband. And I was wondering how you were able to manage those two different kind of ways of being, and what was going on for you.
Well, when I went to the Warsaw Zoo and was doing research for the film, and I met with Teresa, I had read the book, but I wanted to know the secrets that weren't in the book. And one thing I asked Teresa is, if your mom was an animal, what kind of animal would she be? And she said a cat. So it made me very happy you said that. And Punya, I guess, is the nickname that Jan had given Antonina and called her, and it means little cat. As far as the seductive nature of Antonina, I actually saw her as very pure, and I didn't see her as manipulative. I think she actually sees the good in everyone, and sees everyone as being redeemable. I don't think she was trying to lie to Heck. And in fact, the embrace in that hallway is only to cover his ears, you know? So I don't think she wants it to go a certain direction. I think she just knows that she has a way with him, and she needs to use it to save people's lives.
Niki, is it challenging to turn a real-life story into a fictional tale? And if so, where were the moments that were the most challenging?
Yes and no. I kind of, not for me, given the work that I have done. When I work best, it's when I can have some connection to something real. And that was sort of tested a bit on this because it was a profound historical event, and I felt very much the weight of the responsibility of both recreating the Holocaust, but also being faithful to Antonina and who she was. And it's a thing that I called only to myself, just being spiritually faithful to the material. And the interesting thing about this was that Antonina informed all of the filmmaking because she was very soft and very strong. Her strength and softness was also mine. So I took hers and I added it to mine and Jessica's. And so you have a very strong and soft movie. Which I'm very proud of, because it feels a little bit new, this kind of filmmaking from this perspective, particularly within this genre, and I feel Antonina very strongly in the movie.
Yeah, I think that definitely comes through. One of the things that struck me was one of the last scenes where Antonina hands her baby to her best friend and trusts that she's gonna find them again. I mean, they're now, now Russia's invading and they're leaving, and I'm sure they have a plan. But I was like, what? And not only does she get the baby back, but she finds her husband, and almost everyone who was close to them, who was on that caravan, ends up back at the zoo.
Well, that's all completely correct. She did leave Teresa was it with Magda or was it with somebody else?
She did leave her with Magda, and I think it also informs how much friendship meant to Antonina. She risked her family's life initially to bring her friend into her home, and I think that speaks to how race, religion, nothing got in the way of humanity for her, and she really held friendship as loyal as family because humankind and animal kind were her family.
Yeah, there were some scenes that weren't there a long time ago where Antonina found Teresa. She reunited with all the people in a far part of Poland. But we never shot those. They were excised from the script.
So she would trust her friend to take her child, and that she would find her again.
And Jan did. He was shot in the neck. He was imprisoned, and he was liberated by the Russians and walked home. You know.
Amazing. Another producer on the film said something that I read that I wanted to ask each of you to see if you could comment on. So he said, in making The Zookeeper's Wife, we hope that it will be a reminder to people, do not turn a blind eye to what goes on today in the world. What does that mean to each of you? We'll start with Robbie.
Well, as fate would have it, we're releasing this film in an amazingly political climate where refugees are a key issue, and I can't imagine a stronger story to get out there than get involved and do what you can personally. Every voice counts, everything that you could possibly do counts, and I feel like, to me, that's what this is all about.
And to speak a little further on that, we've been really fortunate to have so many wonderful partners on this film. If you hashtag The Zookeeper's Wife, we've partnered with the IRC, the UN, and Frank Center. And I think the wonderful thing about Antonina was she really respected her nature. She knew who she was, and she married her nature and her talent, which was nurturing and caring for things, and she acted on it. And so for me, it's asking the question, what would I do? Really thinking about what speaks to you individually, and go ahead and look at our partners, and there's actually suggestions about things that might appeal to you individually to get involved in. And so we hope that there's a modern day humanitarian response to this movie.
Well, I think when we first started this, I always thought of this as kind of a timeless story, and it obviously has become a timely story. And I was reminded about that today when I had to go on the internet for something and went on Yahoo, and there was a story that just happened this morning, I think, in Sacramento, where a survivor of the Holocaust stood up and confronted the lawmakers there about the immigration policies that are happening, and told them very strongly that they should be ashamed of themselves by going after people who have nowhere else to go. So I think, ironically, there couldn't be a better time to release this film, and hopefully we can speak to that to people.
Everything they said. And also, it's important to remember that Antonina was an ordinary woman. She wasn't a politician. She wasn't a celebrity. She didn't have 1 million followers on social media. And she did what she could to help others, and she made a difference in so many people's lives. And that energy is contagious. She fought war and violence with love. And I think sometimes that's more brave, to go up against violence with love. So hopefully that'll inspire people who feel hopeless and feel like they don't have a platform and they can't make a difference. When they see her story, know that she was an ordinary woman and she made a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, they've all spoken so beautifully about this. I would just add that we screened the movie at the Holocaust Museum in DC earlier a week ago. Yeah, and that was a very moving place to show this piece of work. But one thing's really stayed with me, which was a speech that was given before the movie, and they said, what you do matters. And it does. What we do, Antonina shows us that what we do individually is capable of changing, of making change. Her humanity, radical humanity, and the decency of that couple inspires me all the time. Yeah, That's me.
That's a great answer. I have some questions here from the audience. So Taylor Blackwell asks to Jessica, how do you choose your roles?
I like characters. Hi, Taylor. I don't know where you are. I like characters that push against society in some way, that defy the status quo of what a woman is expected to be or to do, and challenge the people around her. I chose this role because there's something very beautiful about showing a character who is very feminine and also very strong. I think sometimes, I just did this film where I played a woman who was very aggressive in her strength. And sometimes society equates femininity with weakness. And I don't think that's the case. And Antonina is a great example of that. So that I was inspired to take this film. And Niki. Like, Well Rider was one of my favorite films. Working with Niki, I hope this isn't the only experience. Okay, good. Because there's something so earthy, and she's just embodies everything that I want to be. And she's an incredible human being and artist, so that was a big draw for me.
I have another one for you, Jessica. This is from Sylvia, who asks, what was the research process for the character, and what did you learn from playing her?
Okay, hello, Sylvia. The research process, I started with the book, and The Zookeeper's Wife is based on Antonina's journals. So it was great. I had that inside scoop into what she was thinking. Then from there, I went to the Warsaw Zoo and met with Teresa, which was so helpful, and found out so much that wasn't even in the book. Then I went to Auschwitz. I knew that Antonina didn't know what was happening in the camps, but I also knew that the story was more than just about one family. And so I wanted to be there and to experience that firsthand, that place. I worked with people who spend their careers working with animals to try to nurture that quality that Antonina had, that gift she had, tried to nurture that within myself. And then I learned the piano.
I told you, impeccable preparation.
And I worked with Joan Washington on the accent, because Antonina was born and raised in St. Petersburg, and her parents were killed when she was young, and she found her sanctuary in Warsaw. So it was really important to be specific with that, because in my mind, Antonina was a refugee, and I wanted to show that.
This is a question for Niki from Cami Kidder. And she asks, I read that you said hiring so many women to work on this film wasn't intentional, but should it be? Don't we need to engineer some female-centric hiring to begin to level the playing field?
Yeah, we might need to do that. I've been talking about this for a few weeks now. I've never talked about this. I always wanted to protect my right to be a director, not a female director, but just a director. But it has occurred to me that when I made North Country, it was like 13 years ago, with Charlize, to now, the statistic hasn't changed. There's still only 4% of directors that are female. So now's the time to talk about it. And yeah, it's true, exactly what Kim said. We didn't engineer the female hiring. They were the best people for the job. But I think now I might want to be a little bit, more proactive in that department. Because it's just so nice having girls around.
Yay, that's what we like to hear. For Jessica, this is from Nirav Bhakta, and oh wait, did I
see you.
And he asks, as creative people, we go through journeys with each project, and I believe we learn something about ourselves, oh, we already answered this one, but we'll see if you learned something different about yourself in the Zookeeper's Wife.
From playing
Yeah.
Antonina?
Yeah.
Okay, I learned from people working with animals that you wait for them to invite you into their space. Whereas before, I always just wanted to like grab everyone and hug them and cuddle every animal. And I learned that you wait for them to approach you or to invite you. You know, they become curious about you, and then you can interact with them. And I think that's a good lesson for people too.
I have time for one last question, and this is from Katie, and it's actually for Jessica and Niki. And the question is, what is one of your favorite moments on the set of this film? Okay, Niki first.
Oh man, there were so many. But maybe this. That little bunny. Stupid me, when we had shot the scene, it was amazing, both actors incredible. I'd missed the close-up of the bunny being handed from one person to the other. And I was in the Czech Republic. My editor, David, was here. We talked to each other every day, and he said, you know, I think you missed the shot of the bunny. So we had to come back the next day and sort of set it up and give the bunny its close-up. And that bunny, that's take one. That's amazing. So yeah, I mean, and that's sort of indicative of all the way we were with the animals, right? I said this the other night at a Q&A. I said that I didn't, you know, in working with the animals, that was the question, that the environment I like for the animals is just this, working with the animals was just the same as working with the actors. And everybody laughed because it seemed to be saying that I thought actors were animals, which I don't. But actually the process is really the same. With just an all-human cast, I would always create an environment where everything was as real as possible, where you feel very, very safe and supported, and a collaborative environment where you can play a little and we can feel it out. It's quite organic. And so with the animals, it was exactly the same. It was just a completely different species. And they rose to the occasion every single time, didn't they?
Yeah, my favorite would definitely be the animals. The very first day of shooting, and I'm not good on a bicycle. Niki edited around me getting on and off the bike and falling over and all that stuff. But that first day and being at the zoo and it being so beautiful before the war comes, before we had to destroy it, and feeding, you know, I got to feed the monkeys that day and share grapes and play with the mother wolf, and it was just really magical. And that was the very first day of shooting, and I remember thinking, it can't all be like this. It's so incredible, and it really was.
Well, this movie is a real gift, and it opens in theaters on Friday. Please spread the word on social media. This is a film directed by, it's actually made by women, so hashtag 52 films by women, and help us spread that women in film hashtag, and also hashtag Zookeeper's Wife. Thank you.
Thank you.